Hi, my name is Baiju. I'm the co-founder of Robinhood, and Robinhood's mission is to make the financial system accessible for everyone, and to make this really critical part of our society a little bit more democratic, a little bit less top-heavy. So that's what our mission is. Our products are mobile and web products that let consumers all around the country invest in stocks, so all of the 10,000 or so publicly traded companies in the US, ETFs, pretty much every single one of those, options and cryptocurrencies, invest in all of those with no commission. And there's no minimums, and I'd like to think it's a very nice user experience too. So that's what we do.
You have a question? Raise your hand, we'll bring it to you.
Hi, my name is Raja Weiss. Thank you for being here. I'm very happy to hear about your mission because I share that, democratizing the financial sector. My company is called Spot Idol, and our goal, my goal, is to create a platform where idols and people grow, have fun, and profit. And so my question is for you. You mentioned in your speech that in America, a lot of money is spent on consumables, less in investment. So do you think that idols, people that have influence over, masses of people and over people's preferences, do you think in the near future that they might be able to increase the amount that people invest?
That's an interesting question. I think it certainly has the possibility to do that. It's not something that we've played around with too much at Robinhood. Our viewpoint has been, can we make something that's very individually useful for people, where the personal motivation is really strong, and people are motivated by having more money, and I think it's kind of a ubiquitous thing. The tying that with really popular consumer brands is something where I think we could have more people that are really prominent in society championing, and we've had a lot of people that are very well known on the public forum join the team of Robinhood. So we have investors that include folks like Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, Jared Leto, and a list of people that's too long to list. So the tentative answer is, yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting idea.
Hi there. So my question is more about how you guys are really disrupting the industry. And if you look at the intermediary part of the industry, my company, we focus on providing data analytics to the publicly traded side so that they proactively reach out to institutional investors, retail, broker. But if you look at the intermediary part of the industry, I think that's really ripe for disruption if you're talking about integrating blockchain, crypto that you guys just entered into. Can you discuss what you think and what you see in terms of the evolution over the next 20 years? Like, I think ComputerShare, those types of companies are probably going to become obsolete, and whether you guys are looking into that now as well.
Let me think about this for a second. So I think the broad question is, how do we see financial services going in the next 20 years or so, and how do we see the different layers of financial services evolving as it happens? First of all, I think that there's a realization that we had a couple of years ago that I think kind of is very strongly motivating for us as those building Robinhood, which is that if we hadn't done this, if we weren't the ones that were the proprietors of this change in the financial system, really trying to drive the cost of these services down lower and lower, this isn't something that this would have naturally happened. And I think that's a kind of an interesting thing, which is that there's so much vested interest in the way that the financial system works today that it is going to be an uphill battle, and it's not going to be particularly interest to sort of divest the very small group of people that have a disproportionate control over the way the money system works. And I think the way to do that is through the openness of the internet, right? Making it very easy for everyone to be a part of the financial system, to make it really easy for people to start saving money in the same way that the wealthiest people do, And the way to do that is to really drive the cost of this stuff down and take the fact that sometimes there are too many intermediaries and get rid of them. And I think that it's a cultural thing. It's got to be something that's driven by really good products. And yeah, I think in 20 years, the cost of all financial services will be closer to the cost of the internet, where it's pretty much entirely free. And hopefully we are the ones that are helping drive that change.
Question in the back.
Yeah.
Back right.
Yeah, with the laptop.
I don't know if you can hear me, but
I can hear you.
how do you feel about retail investors on the platform and educating them in a way where they can compete in the marketplace with more sophisticated investors with more knowledge, or not necessarily more knowledge, but more sophisticated information and resources?
So the question was, how do we feel about individual investors in the marketplace relative to sort of professional traders and the fact that they may have access to some information that individual investors don't have, and how can we be a part of the education process? So a couple of things there. Using Robinhood as an educational tool is something that we've been hearing from our consumers since day one. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing, because there are lots of different things that lots of different steps to becoming more educated as people invest in the stock market or think about saving money or investing as a whole. And there's a component of how do you actually gain the real world experience of doing this thing, and then what's the information that you're learning to actually do that stuff. And our viewpoint has always been that the information that consumers, professional investors, institutions have, they're kind of the same. Like, we've been on the institutional side in the past as well, and you look at the sort of secret sauce of information that institutions and professionals have, and in my opinion, it's kind of not there. Like, what do professional traders do when they want to learn about the stock market? They Google it. They look at the same stuff that the rest of us do. So we think that the real missing piece is giving everybody else the chance to actually do the action of buying stocks, do the action of buying ETFs or options or cryptos, make that really easy, and help people start to overcome some of the hurdles that are more sort of personal in getting started with this. And I'll give you one example of this. And this comes a little bit from my own experience, and I know that this is something that I've heard from countless people over the years. But when people are first getting started with the idea of saving money or investing, there's kind of this question of what happens after you do it, right? Like, how much, it's like, oh, well, I'm gonna go out and buy a share of, let's say, Facebook or something like that, right? Never done it before. I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, you buy the stock for the first time and you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh my God, I might have lost I've lost all my money, or I might be really rich. And what actually happens is neither of those things. Is you wake up the next day and you look at how your investment's done and you're like, I'm up 5 cents. Or oh, I lost a quarter. And I think that this is a realization that a lot of people have when they get started for the first time, which is that the perception of volatility, what they thought was gonna happen, is pretty different than what actually happens. You don't lose all of your money or become a millionaire overnight. You kind of just see it grow very, very slowly over time. So these little things, these sort of mental hurdles for people to overcome, to get an idea of what it feels like to own some stocks, realize that there is some risk, but by and large, if you're buying large cap companies or you're buying ETFs, you're not going to see them move that much, is a pretty interesting thing. I'm sorry, I think I might have gone a little bit off topic, but hopefully that was helpful.
Question in the back to your right.
Can you talk a little bit about what sorts of things motivated you to first start investing, and also what the business model looks like, since you don't see commission?
Yep. So I started investing, I think it was when I was in college. It was in 2005 or 2006. And I had a summer job at Stanford. I was doing some research in the physics department. And I'd saved up a little bit of money, and I wanted to go to Asia. I wanted to go to China. And I was like, I don't really have that much money. So what I would do is I would take the money that I had gotten from my summer research program, and I would transfer it to my mom, and I would ask my mom to buy Apple stock with it for me on, I think, her TD Ameritrade platform. So that's how I first started getting involved with investing, and the reason I did it is because I was poor and I wanted more money. It's like pretty simple motivation. It was like a little side hustle, way to make a little more money. And I think about this often. I think about this from the point of view of kind of trying to reflect on my own experiences and realizing that I wasn't particularly sophisticated when I started investing, and most people really aren't that sophisticated when they start, trying to draw on those experiences to kind of get some intuition and some empathy for how other people might be thinking about this as they're getting started. So that's the first part of the question. The second one is how do we make money if we don't charge commissions? And there's a few things here. So the ways that we make money are, we have a pro version of Robinhood called Robinhood Gold, which lets you get access to margin, so you can borrow money from us, and we have other features in there that are a little bit more sophisticated, like after-hours trading and increased instant deposits into Robinhood. That's one of the main ways we make money. The other main way is that we collect interest on both the cash and the securities that you hold. But I think that there's something about that answer that a lot of people, it's not quite what people are looking for. And I think that's because the real answer of how Robinhood is a viable, thriving, high growth business is because the way that we operate is that not only do we make money off of these things, but the cost structure of our business is fundamentally very, very different than every other financial institution out there, and it looks a lot more like an internet company. And so by that, what I mean is that our growth is buttressed by a lot of organic growth, and things like our referral program drive a really substantial amount of our growth. We have a team that is almost exclusively an engineering team. So right now, Robinhood is about 150 people, and you compare that to a company like E-Trade that has 3,600 people. Like, the efficiency and the leverage that we're getting off of our company is very different. And so all this is to say the cost structure of running Robinhood is just several orders of magnitude less than running, one of these establishment brokerages. And so we balance those two, and by and large, we think our margins look just fantastic.
Another question in the back. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, so two questions. First one is, there are a lot of exchanges in the crypto space right now. By jumping into the exchange, what can Robinhood bring to the table other than its free fee, feature? And the second one is, just being Korean, a lot of Korean exchanges are now being backed by some of the bigger corporates in Korea, and these are kind of Google's or Facebook's equivalent in Korea. How do you see the competition shaping up in the exchange space?
So the first question is, how does Robinhood plan to make Robinhood Crypto a better product? Is that basically right? And the second one is, how do we think about competition, in particular in some of the exchanges being backed by larger companies? I think on the second point I can answer first. So as a matter of operating principle, one of the things that we focus on, or that we reiterate a lot at Robinhood, is that we try not to think too much about the competition. We try to focus on what we're doing and what our consumers want. And I think it comes from the idea that no great company has ever been built copying other people. And we think we're pretty good at this stuff. We think we're really good at building the actual product. So it doesn't make too much sense for us to think about what other people are doing too much. On the question of how will Robinhood make a better product for investing in cryptos, our motto when we were building Robinhood Crypto was better products, better prices. And by better products, we mean a whole slew of things. The user experience for investing, we think that we're building something that is an order of magnitude better than anything that's out there, and it's not even comparable to some of the more complicated exchange platforms that you see. I think you'll see a lot of really interesting stuff from us, and that's what I'll kind of leave it at that. And I think the second thing is that on offering this at a price point that's zero commission is incredibly compelling. It makes it so that the cost of doing it for the first time is so low, and in turn the sort of cognitive overhead is very low. We also think that we're going to be able to unlock an entirely new way of investing in cryptocurrencies and unlock a pretty different market for it. So yeah, I think the price makes a huge difference.
Another question in the back? Go ahead.
Hello, hi, I'm Mensch Dizon, and I flew in all the way from the Philippines. So I'm curious how you are planning to engage emerging markets with Robinhood and how you can make it more inclusive in terms of investing for emerging markets.
Very good question, and something that I think you'll see a lot more activity from us nearing the end of this year and the beginning of next year. So a point of personal frustration for me is that we have not had a chance to do this yet. As a person that's of international descent, my parents are from India, the idea of making the progress that we're making on Robinhood in the States useful to people around the world is something that it's a fire that burns pretty deeply inside of me, and something that I'm like very passionate about doing. I think for us it's a question of right time, and we decided to wait a little bit longer before expanding internationally and making Robinhood available all around the world until we felt really confident with the business that we built in the US. And by that, what I mean is that we wanted to make sure that we didn't get distracted trying to launch in different markets. I think operating a business from here around the world, we had a little foray with it when we launched in China. It was really hard. It was, like, we kind of had all this stuff that we were doing in the US, and we're like, oh, we've got this other thing in China, and the user, the user mentality, what people are actually using products for there, the cultural norms are so different. It's like, oh, we've got to keep that in mind, and we've got to keep this in mind, and we're just like, we should make sure that the business that we build in the US is first, generating revenue, is able to reinvest that revenue in its growth, and is growing into a market that's very large and has a really healthy growth trajectory. We feel much more confident about that today, and I think that's kind of what we were looking for to feel confident launching abroad. So stay tuned.
Other questions? Right here in the middle.
So, there was already a question kind of about disruption, but I think, was there ever a moment when you guys were thinking about with the free commissions where you were like, well, $1.99 commission would be a huge disruption? And how did you guys land on just saying we're going to go with no commissions? Because the first time I was introduced to Robinhood, I was like, this is crazy. Like, how do they do this, right? And so it's so far outside of what the norm was. So I would be interested in just kind of that thought process of how you guys came to that.
So this is a really good question. I'm trying to give you a really honest answer to this that's pretty unfiltered. Yeah, we knew it was pretty nuts when we were doing it, and the biggest driving factor was that we didn't want to do something that felt incremental. We wanted to do something that was very difficult for us to do, and it was very difficult for us to do. We wanted to do something that was going to be transformative, and let's just be totally real about this. Launching another brokerage platform that charges $1.99, that is not interesting. That is not intellectually interesting to me at any level, and is not something that I wanted to be spending the best years of my life, the years when I had that fire that was burning the brightest. I didn't want to spend my time doing that. I wanted to spend my time challenging the status quo and seeing if I could really upend the financial system. And yeah, free was very difficult from the beginning, but we looked at the numbers and we thought about it very carefully, and we realized that it was basically a trade-off between having it was a trade-off between having a business model that would work really well if we got to a larger scale, and what it would take to get to that larger scale. And the hypothesis from the very beginning, and where a lot of the thinking happened, was that if we could build a product, or if we could do some stuff that was a little bit more clever, that was like a little bit more like interesting around getting our user base to grow quickly in the early days, we could kind of jump past those, like 100,000 user mark, 250,000, 500,000 user mark, to get to the point where the economies of scale really started kicking in. And we're like, look, we're only gonna live once, let's just try to solve this bigger problem. And so, we did.
We have 2 more questions, one at the very back. Good.
Hey there. Been a long time user of Robinhood for the last year or so. Absolutely adore the app. Question I have: the cryptocurrency waiting list, is there some sort of systemic reason for that, or is it purely to try and get more folks in on the app? Thank you.
So there's quite a bit of utility built into our waiting list for crypto. I think kind of to come back to the point from earlier before, we realize that is one of the things that we've developed that works really well to help us get a sense of how many consumers we're going to have on our product. Given that we operate in a pretty tightly regulated space, and there's things like anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist, anti-fraud protections at every step along the way, we have to have pretty rigorous, well-thought-out consumer identification processes in place. There's a lot of sort of meat and potatoes work that goes into doing what we're doing. It helps a lot to have a sense of how big of an audience we're building a product for, because if we were building Robinhood for 10,000 people, the engineering, the back end, all that stuff would have looked very different than if we were building it for 1 million people, which is what we were. And I think that thinking applies pretty directly to crypto. The other thing that was relevant for crypto, and the reason that we thought having a waiting list was going to be pretty useful, is that as we roll Robinhood Crypto out, we're going to be doing it on a state-by-state basis as we engage local regulators and get the established licenses in each one of those states. So it helps us sort of say, let's let all the people in the first 5 states that we're launching in at first. So that's like California, Montana, New Hampshire, Missouri, and another one. I feel bad for not remembering it, but yeah, sort of doing it, giving us a roadmap for how to launch it in each one of the states that we are.
One last question real quick, right here.
So I really love the Robinhood user interface. So sometimes I was thinking, will that bring in too much money getting the stock trading and inflating the market? Like you get a really frequent trading, so the stock price is not really reflecting the real price of the market, but it will be actually inflation. Are you afraid of that one for the stock trading?
I'm not very afraid of it because of the way income is distributed in our country, is that we're all about letting the majority of people that have been on the outside be a part of the system. The amount of dollars that are moving in, it's going to be a ways until we have, a really outsized impact on the price of securities. Institutional investors still, as big as we're becoming, they still dominate the total number of dollars that are invested. So things like, pension funds, large hedge funds, they're operating on a different scale.
Let's give them one last round of applause.